All right, welcome to the party, pal. GRC Mafia. I see a few different people popping in already, like B-Dubs and Mike as well. I see a comment regarding B-Dubs calling out 8-bit. I'm not sure what that's in regards to, but I could believe it. So it is 8-bit after all. But yeah, welcome to the party, pal, everybody. So we want to go ahead and start this off with just the statement, just so everybody's well aware. We're here to break down barriers, collaboration, community, working towards a more secure future for everybody. This is definitely a learning and growing environment itself. So if you guys have any questions or anything else, if I don't know it, I'm sure I know somebody else who would be able to answer the question. So whether it pertains to what we're talking about at that time or otherwise, definitely drop your questions and so forth in chat. All right. And then also, like, our Discord server is absolute fire for questions and so forth outside of the stream. Or you can also drop your questions in the comments below if you're on Team Replay. I'm going to go ahead and drop that Discord now. So our typical schedule now is Monday, Tuesday for hands-on. Wednesday is our GRC Let's Get Technical. So like tomorrow, we'll actually be doing a deep dive on VLANs. Thursday, we have a really good presentation lined up with Chad Butler for product security in GRC. So that's going to be a really cool meeting on Thursday night. So if you guys can make that or even catch the replay, that's one of the benefits of recording. And then Friday for our AMA, so 11 a.m. Central Time. And thanks for everybody popping in and so forth. So today's going to be a pretty big one for actually jumping into the CSF framework finally. I see 8-bit popping in. We got Rania. We got Cybercycle, Regine, Laura Flores, bam, GRC Mafia, Jeffrey. So I can go ahead and drop the stage link if anybody would like to come up, but otherwise I'm just going to push through this on CISO Assistant. There are a couple things that I went through and modified outside of the live stream that I was going to cover real quick because I am trying to document the whole process here. But if you do come up, you do not have to turn on your video. No matter what, definitely ask questions, even if it doesn't pertain to what we're talking about at that time. If you guys would like to drop your personal LinkedIn page or other social media, you're welcome to do so. But the best place to do that is inside of our Discord server in the live chat channel. That will actually relay it through all the different platforms. Otherwise, YouTube's going to, just not actually send that link. And then definitely share your resources, your useful resources and so forth as well, and whatever else that you guys are working on as well. If you do share something that you don't want to be public, just reach out to me on Discord or LinkedIn or contact@studygrc.org so we can go ahead and take a look at that and get that resolved. Now, also our website, studygrc.org, has the rest of the platforms that we're streaming to, our calendar, which is going to be the most up-to-date information on what's coming up, and then also our resources page. And then you can see over on the left-hand side there behind that QR code is B-Dubs's. So B-Dubs, not only is she going through and doing her blog for BritWhite.io every single Monday, but then on top of that, there was a CISSP study group that was launched as well. So both of those links are in the chat as well. The next one, I believe it's session 3, will be airing tonight. So that'll be going down at 6 p.m. Central tonight. Bam. All right. And then without further ado, let's go over here. Bam. Hope everybody's having a great week. I know that it's still a little early on, but we all made it past Monday at least. So I went ahead and already got this up here. I'm going to go ahead and throw myself up in the top right. That might be the least out of the way. And then I'll go ahead and zoom in on this as well. Now, if you guys do have questions, definitely drop that in chat. I'll go ahead and monitor that the best I can. But a couple of the things that I wanted to show right off the bat here. I'm definitely going to push for, I mentioned about selecting more than one related control when we were loading in our policies. That's one of the pieces of feedback I'm going to provide them. But then also we need a dark mode. Like... It would be a little bit nicer if we did have a dark mode on here. But there's a few things that I changed. So 2 of the biggest things that we went through and did already inside of CISO Assistant here is we loaded in our third parties, which what I ended up doing is I started going through and I started just documenting them a little bit better. So if we go over here, you can see solutions. So I went ahead and loaded in some of the different solutions, and this is something else that I'm going to fill in as well. So you can see on the left-hand side for third party, we have entities, entity assessment, representatives, and solutions. I started going through and adding the solutions in here and connecting them to the provider as well. And you could see how that actually does have a rating that's involved with it as well. This is just an added bonus to CISO Assistant itself. We already have our third parties documented. However, it could also be useful to narrow it down like, oh, okay, you know, it's just like with Proton Mail, for an example. The mail is extremely important for us, but if we lose access or to the VPN or the calendar, like it's not really the end of the world kind of thing. So I find that pretty useful, but I wanted to mention this portion here just because this is something that I'm going to continue to fill out outside of the streams, just so that way we can go ahead and keep that all up to date there. The second part here, I believe it was under, so the policy section I also went through and modified as well. So yesterday we went through, we added like 23 different ones for policies, which we're going to start working on the policies next month. I believe not this weekend, but next weekend I'll get the video scheduled out. Yeah, so the weekend of the 22nd, I'll get the video scheduled out for next month, where we're going to be going through and building a large majority of these policies here. So there's 28 in total. I went ahead and started adding priorities to it, along with trying to select the best CSF function that it would relate to. So that's just a little bit of a rundown on a couple of the different areas inside of CISO Assistant that I started doing outside of the streams, just so that way we're all on the same page there. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this library for the CSF 2.0. I'm going to double check chat here. Let's see. Yes, yeah, like Laura says, dark mode. Yeah, I know that there's plugins and so forth that will force dark mode, but I've had really bad luck with that in the past with just messing up the interface. So yeah, but yeah, it would be, I think it would look really good too. So over here under governance and libraries, and I'm going to drop the link to this too. So CISO Assistant is this program that we're utilizing. You could do the exact same thing inside of any spreadsheet as well. We've went through and did the risk register in a spreadsheet, imported that into CISO Assistant, and then we're going to continue to go through and build out our program for Study GRC within CISO Assistant. There's several different large advantages to utilizing a tool. First of all, CISO Assistant's free and open source for their community edition, but then also it just makes one location of information. It makes a single hub for all of that different information, and really also creates a better ability to relate those relationships between things as well. Yeah, Cybercycle says dark mode is like a necessity at this point. Yeah. Literally right before we went live here, I was looking in the settings here, and it doesn't appear that they have any dark mode still yet. So definitely join their Discord server. You guys can mention it as well. I mean, the more votes there are for different features and so forth, then the better off it is. So there was also another thing that I was looking at here. Let me go back to the library store. So they have 138 different libraries. Okay, so they do have 2 of these. So this is something else I was looking at as well, which we will do in the future too. So what I'm trying to work on is I'm trying to figure out the deadlines for, because I'm trying to do as much of this as possible on Mondays and Tuesdays during this live stream. So that way this is also all documented. But so we're going to go through and we're going to start some of the assessments starting today, and the rest of this month we'll start these assessments on these third parties. And then starting next month, we'll start working on the policies themselves and try to get those knocked out for the majority. And then the following month is when I was actually looking at going back around and actually doing videos doing the GDPR and CCPA compliance checks as well. So that's one of the really cool benefits here. So that not only do they have a checklist for it, but then also they do have the CCPA regulations in here as well. So for an example, the CCPA regulations, we can go ahead and hit on the little I there to look at this. And you could see here, Chapter 1, California Consumer Privacy Act regulations, conflict of interest, data broker registration. And so we could open each one of these up and actually see, you know, what the regulation statutes are. And, you know, they would be related to, you know, a control subcategory, subcontrol. So yeah, this is what we would load in and then do a compliance check or a compliance audit. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. I may add additional streams. That's what I'm working on now, is to see. Now we got Chris Helgago. Oh, Jesus. I almost had the name down. Helgado in chat. I love NIST. Yeah. GRC Mafia. NIST for life. I'm not even joking. I believe it was Cybersecurity who I was talking with, or otherwise in chat, about getting, you know, NIST on one knuckle and then love on the other one. So yeah. NIST for life. But yeah, and if I'm, one of the other big things too is to definitely provide feedback and so forth. So I'm going to hop into this CSF 2.0 in just a moment. But if you guys do have questions or otherwise, definitely drop those in chat. And then also, you know, what do you guys want to see as well? So I'm trying to line this out. I'm looking at most likely doing like one extra stream next month each week, just to try to fill in some of that time as well. Because like developing those policies, there's no way, there's several of those policies that will take several days worth of time. So I'm just trying to figure out the scheduling on that. I want to do as much of it as possible live streamed. All right, so what I was coming over here to the libraries for is to showcase the libraries. We got CSF 2.0, we got the 5x5, and then we also have MITRE built in here as well, so MITRE attack. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go down to our third parties. Let's go ahead and do entities. And so each one of these ones, we can go through and do an entity assessment, which I think we'll just go through and do the overall. Let's see. So that's going to be under, let's go ahead and do the risk. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this one that we started before because I threw that under the demo domain. Bam. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and create another one. So, so initial compliance audit. All right. So initial compliance audit against, I'm going to go ahead and say with NIST CSF 2.0. I'm going to actually go ahead. Why will it not let me? Oh, I didn't select the parameter yet. I think I may have to add that first. Because I added the parameter over here. All right, bam. I'm going to go ahead and mark this as in development. I'm going to mark it as global program. Bam. Now I should be able to head back on over to our compliance, audit, add, and then I should be able to put this back in here. I'm going to go ahead and select global program. So we're going to double check the global program, and we're just going to fly through the CSF 2.0 and showcase some of those different features there. I'm going to add myself as the primary on here. Not filling in any ETA at this time. The assets we can go ahead and fill in later on. Use documentation score will be available for scoring the requirements. That's fine. That's fine. We're going to go ahead and mark this as in progress. The reviewers will leave blank for now. Bam. And then we'll go ahead and hop into that in just a moment. Yeah, so Cybercycle, that is my understanding as well. I honestly have absolutely no idea. So if you look at if you look at their actual documentation and so forth, I don't even believe it's on there. I'm actually going to double check it because my understanding is exactly like what you're saying is the actual boundary. Let's see. Okay, so they actually renamed projects as parameters. So literally what they mean by parameters is projects. And that's according to their actual page here. So they did update this section at least. So you can see right here, parameters were previously named projects, but this was misleading. And so, yeah, I believe that it is supposed to be the boundary. So that way you can actually select that segment, that area, that zone, that department. Oh, we got PBO hopping in. 853 SME. Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, it's a really good question there, Cybercycle. And it's also stuff like that. It's just like I was kind of assuming that it meant, some type of boundary or department or otherwise, but I hadn't looked it up before. So, bam. I am glad that they have that updated on their documentation there, though. All right, and I already pulled this open, but let me go ahead and go back real quick. So we went through and we went ahead and started our first compliance against NIST CSF 2.0. I went ahead and called this audit the initial compliance audit, and we're just gonna, I think it messed up again. So you could see here that it says demo global program. That's not what I wanted. So I have to go back over to parameter. Oh, you can see, okay, the actual domains. All right, let me see. Yeah, because I do not want that under that. Yeah, so I got to change the domain. Okay, why is it not letting me change the domain? This might be a glitch or something because it's not letting me change the domain when I go to add a parameter. I think that's a bug. Let's see. So if I go back over to domains, you could see that I have global and then, oh, we have demo underneath global. Okay, I see. So it probably can't be the actual parent. It has to be one of the subcategories. Bam. All right. Well, then in that case, let's go ahead and add another one. So I'm going to go ahead and add, we'll go ahead and do, so I'm probably just going to go ahead and I'm thinking something like compliance checks or something along those lines, which are going to be like org-wide. Since it's not allowing us to actually select global as the parent. So I almost kind of want to call it like compliance department or otherwise. But I'm just, for now, we should be able to come back through and change this around anyways. I just don't want to run off of demo for the rest of this. So I'm going to go ahead and actually delete demo, and it should probably remove it from the rest of those. So now I have compliance check put underneath global. I'm going to come back over here, and it actually completely removed those now. So I'm going to call this a global CSF compliance. And PBO is probably rolling around right now talking about NIST and compliance. Yeah, NIST is almost always voluntary, and they're like one of the little pet peeves there is that, oh, we're compliant with NIST CSF 2.0. Okay, but there's no. You could follow the NIST CSF 2.0. You could follow the 853 and so forth, but there's not really like a compliance component of that. And nobody's really going through and implementing that whole thing. PBO can probably go through and explain that portion even better. Let's see. Oh yeah, and CyberCycle mentions the terminology throughout the CGRC. Yeah. It's a really good possibility, confusing the wording as well, Laura. Yeah, because I mean, that is one of the things that I noticed. Honestly, what I would like to see, I know that they have language packs that you can put out. And what I was actually going to look at is to see if I can modify my own English. So I can duplicate the English language pack that they have, and then try to change some of that terminology so that way it's more relevant with NIST at least. Because also they utilize the term probability rather than likelihood. And that's like another pet peeve of mine. Yeah, and like Mike mentioned, yeah, no compliance certification for NIST. Yeah. So yeah, like we understand what people mean when they say, "Oh, we're compliant with NIST CSF or whatever it is," but there's no certification, there's no verification or anything like that. That would typically imply for compliance. Yeah. It's a little bit different than like ISO, for an example. ISO is where you actually have some type of accreditation that coincides with it, or attestation like with SOC. Yeah, how's it going, PBO? Yeah, so for now, I'm going to just go ahead and throw this under, global CSF compliance, and we'll go ahead and get the ball running. I'm going to go ahead. Yeah, we definitely have this in development is what I'm going to say. And then let's go ahead and hop back over here. Bam. Has anybody else went through and set up a CISO assistant or otherwise? There's another little project thing that I was working with as well. You can also go through and sign up for like literally a completely free trial. I believe it's like 45 days on their website as well, if you just wanted to spin up a box pretty easily. Let's see. So risk, compliance, audit, bam. Oh, and it even deleted the entire audit there too. All right. So initial CSF compliance check. Bam. All right. So CSF compliance audit to begin to compare profiles All right, so one of the big reasons why we're going to go through and do this now is just so that way we can also look back later on and then also be able to see as we improve on the NIST CSF 2.0. And in the long run, I really hope that we can go through and add additional. So we'll go through and do NIST CSF 2.0. We'll go through and do GDPR, CCPA, get these policies implemented. And then hopefully eventually we even go ahead and bolt on the 27001 is probably going to be a little bit more complicated, strictly because, we can't live stream that, but, paywalls, but we'll see how we can do that. ETA, okay, bam. Let's go ahead and save that, and then we'll go ahead and open this up. And then now we can see that that is underneath our global CSF compliance. So bam, that part's done. And then PBO mentions the 853, get that federal ATO, so authority to operate. Yeah. Now, that's only for federal agencies, right? Like no, like a privately held business can't apply for that, right? PBO. I mean, you're literally making an entire course on the 53 as we speak. And then also that's another really good keynote here too, now that I remember. So PBO is going live tonight. So I just dropped his channel in the chat. Definitely take a look at his channel. If you're not familiar with PBO, he is a well-known superstar in the GRC realm on, all of these different communities and so forth. 810 videos. He's making an 853 course and everything else. And then tonight, so he usually streams every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So he has like a late night GRC party basically. And so like tonight he's going over IRS publication 4812, which is actually one I haven't heard him talk about. What the hell is the IRS publication 4812 PBO? I guess we'll find out tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern, right? So it looks like it's security and privacy control requirements that apply to contractors, subcontractors, contractor employees, and some contractor employees for the IRS is what it appears to be, based out of 53. Bam. So in short, IRS privacy and security requirements specific to IRS contracting environment. Wow, I'm surprised there's still stuff that's coming up that I hadn't heard PBO talk about. But yeah, definitely take a look at that. And I'll actually pull it up on screen here real quick too. Let me go ahead and drop in chat here. Bam, GRC Mafia. All right. So now hopping back over here. So this is a really important section here. So if you guys are out there in the community, GRC Mafia, and you guys still haven't been able to give CISO Assistant a spin or otherwise, definitely reach out to me and let me know. If you guys are struggling on a particular area of getting it set up on Docker or in the cloud or otherwise, definitely reach out if you guys need any assistance with that aspect. But now we're looking at the primary screen here. As we go through the audit, we're going to go this is going to be the exact same as if you go through the assessment for the risk or the compliance audit itself. The interface is the same. There's a couple key areas here like export. We can go ahead and export this to Word, the action plan as a PDF and so forth as well. And so this is going to kind of be like our gap where we're going to be able to identify like, okay, this is all of the stuff that we have no idea about and areas that we need to work on. So that way we could start working on our actual maturity and our profile. So I'm going to go ahead and throw, they have like table mode, they have the mapping and so forth as well. I'm going to go ahead and open up table mode real quick if that pops open. So like in table mode here, like we can go, you can see assessment mode and questionnaire mode, which is pretty neat. And so in table mode, you can go through and see the status of each one. Here in a moment, I'm going to go through and start going through the flashcards. And then like if you do questionnaire mode, then you can go ahead and see, check to enable scoring. And then even upload the evidence from here as well. But so let's go ahead and step back here. We're going to go back into here. We're going to go and go into flash mode so we can jump through a lot of these. We are about halfway through, but I may go over today. Let me double check here. Let's see. Both Viper and Jason hopping in, GRC Mafia. 8-bit mentioning I was late to return. I forfeit my first comment to you. Bam. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and go through this flash mode. I'm actually going to go ahead and minimize that sidebar there, and we'll go ahead and go through some of these. So this is the NIST CSF 2.0. One of the other things that I wanted to mention too is we have a beautiful Trello board. So if you guys are not familiar, definitely check out our website. So if you go to our website here, studygrc.org, you can click on our resources page, and we've really kind of collected a great entire list of different resources here. And another really big thing I want to shout out as well is if you guys have anything else to add to this, this is supposed to be a community resource. I want to figure out a method to maybe we can do some type of database or something like that, or we can implement some type of JavaScript in here. So that way it's easier to search. So we can expand this to way more. I personally have like over 3,000 bookmarks at this point. So this is a very small amount of my resources. This is just some of the best ones out there that I've come across and have been recommended. But if you guys have anything additional you want to add, definitely let me know. The best place to do that is either in chat, in the comments, or on Discord, which is the best place. But right here at the very, very top, you can see our Trello board section. And so we have Trello boards for the CIS. I do need to update that to the 8.1. There's actually another really good resource for the CIS 8.1 for visualization though. Matt Lee on LinkedIn, they did a project where it's like 160 page document that literally has visualizations and examples of how you would implement each control, which is absolutely phenomenal. They did a really good job on that. If you guys want the link to that, I could definitely find that again. But the key thing I wanted to point out here is the CSF 2.0. So if we click on that, I'll drop the link to this directly as well. And so this is just a visualization on Trello, publicly accessible and so forth, which has all the controls for the 2.0. And so I just find it easy to go through and look at it in this particular format. I think it makes way more sense and just comes out way easier to study the framework, especially. You could, in theory, utilize this. So me and PBO did go through and look at a business impact analysis on Atlassian, which is the parent company for Trello. And they do have some sketchy stuff in there, but on their enterprise plan, you could probably get away with it. Yeah. And so like CyberCycle also mentions the 53. So on the left-hand side here, I'm trying to put some useful resources over here, but you can also see Study GRC dashboard. If you click on that, then that will also take you to our main dashboard for all of them. And so like another one we have is the 853, and this is the revision 5. And so especially when you're looking at something as large as the 53, the main reason why I built these out is just for the visualization, because it's way easier for me to learn visually in this format than it is to go through and just read the docs. And so it's the exact same language and everything. It's just copied over into a Trello board. There's two really cool things with Trello. Not only do we have the baselines implemented in here for the 53, which is really cool. So for an example, you can go ahead and select all of the low baselines in the filter over here. And then bam, there you go. You have all of your 149 controls here for low baseline. That is a really cool feature. I think this really makes it a little bit easier. But then also, like I said, if you go to their enterprise plan, then you could deploy Trello in like a actual FedRAMP compliant AWS instance as well. In which case, then you can actually run your actual program or assessments or otherwise in a FedRAMP compliant, more secure. I say more secure because nothing's actually secure per se, but yeah, definitely something to look at, but especially for studying or for searching. So also if you want to search for, recover. So if we search for recover, then we see that there's 10 different controls that pop up that mention the word recover in the 53. And also all the way, it's hard to see here, but all the way to the right, we also have the withdrawn controls that also dictate where they win as well. So bam, that's just some of the stuff on the Trello boards there. Definitely worth mentioning. So then I'm going to hop back over here. I just wanted to definitely drop those resources as well, because I find those to be really useful. Now, let me double check chat. Bam. All right, so we are on the very first control for the CSF 2.0. So OC01, so the organization's mission is understood and informed cybersecurity risk management. I'm going to go ahead and mark this as partially compliant because the board itself and so forth, we do have the mission in mind. We do have, cybersecurity risk management. We are informed on that and so forth. However, we need to get those policies implemented. We need to get our program together. We're working on the development stages of such and so forth. And so that's not going to be compliant, but partially compliant. All right, now this next one. So internal and external stakeholders are understood and their needs and expectations are regarding cybersecurity risk management are understood and considered. So this is also where, so it's mentioning internal and external stakeholders are understood and their needs regarding cybersecurity risk management are understood and considered. So that's, I'm going to probably mark that as a partial as well, especially those third party or otherwise external stakeholder. But yeah, thankfully we don't really have that per se. But yeah. So 03, so legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements regarding cybersecurity, including privacy and civil liberty obligations, are understood and managed. So that keyword at the very end there, so understood and managed. So do we properly understand what we need to have for our legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements regarding cybersecurity? Do we have that currently right now? I would say no, we do not. So we haven't gone through and checked for the CCPA. We haven't gone through and did GDPR. We thankfully, we don't really have any of the contractual requirements. Technically, we do have contracts with our mail provider. We do also have a contract, like business contracts and otherwise, but we don't have contractual requirements for cybersecurity at least. So that does kind of help there, but I'm going to go ahead and actually mark this as not compliant for right now. This may actually be something. So after we go through and get policies and everything else and go through the whole process more so, then this may be changed. But this could also end up as not assessed, tailored out. Now, 04, critical objectives, capabilities, and services that stakeholders depend on or expect from the organization are understood and communicated. All right, so objectives, capabilities, and services that stakeholders depend on are understood and communicated. All right. Well, again, we don't really have the policies for that yet. So I do believe that we have a pretty good setup of tools and our objectives are lined out and so forth. It makes it a lot easier with us having our mission statements and so forth. You know, it's all about community and making things easier, breaking down those barriers and just making it easier overall. So I'm going to go ahead and actually mark this as a partially because it is understood, but is it communicated properly? Probably not. We need to have policies on that as well. Not only for our mission statements and so forth more so, but then also our services. So then outcomes 05, so outcomes, capabilities, and services that the organization depends on are understood and communicated. Okay, so let's see, outcomes, capabilities, and services that the organization depends on are understood and communicated. All right, so we did go through and we did line out like the different services we use and so forth. We could do a better job with outcomes and capabilities maybe. But this one is probably going to actually follow underneath. See, the biggest issue is communicated there. So I believe that that would be understood to an extent, but is it communicated across the board, the stakeholders and an organization? That's the question there. That's also where like a lot of these policies and getting that paperwork, because also one of the other things we have to do is we have an entire board of people. So we will develop the policies and so forth, and then we need to get the buy-in. That's also when we will actually have to go through and submit those policies to the board and have those approved. They'll have to be reviewed, and then there may be edits or otherwise that will be required or asked for, and then it'll go through an approval process. So this one I'm going to go ahead and actually mark as like partially compliant as well, because again, policies and so forth. And another thing to note here is that this is just an initial. So I'm not expecting to have very much in direct relation. So then we're moving on to RM, risk management, governance, risk management, I believe. So risk management objectives are established and agreed to by organizational stakeholders. Bam, that's another one. This is not going to be compliant. Now, the reason I'm marking this as not compliant is because we do not have an established risk management objectives. We do not have anything documented for such, and we have not gone through and got anything approved by the stakeholders at this time. So we are in agreement that we need to develop our program, we need to get the stuff implemented and so forth, but we have not technically gotten to that stage yet. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant. Risk appetite and risk tolerance statements are established, communicated, and maintained. Now, me and the board have talked about risk appetite and the tolerances that study GRC maintains. I believe we do actually have a document that does state that. Although we have already drafted, I believe, an SSP that does dictate the appetite and risk tolerance. However, I wouldn't say that it's established at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this as probably partially compliant, because we have communicated such and so forth. We do technically have a document for that already, and we have discussed that already, but it's not well established or otherwise at this time. And if you guys have any questions or otherwise, or feedback, definitely drop that in chat. We have a lot of big stuff lined up as well. So I'm going to go ahead and keep knocking through this. You can see we are on 8 out of 106 in the top right corner. So let's see how far we get here. So risk management 03. So cybersecurity risk management activities and outcomes are included in enterprise risk management process. Okay. Activities and outcomes are included in enterprise risk management process. Another key thing to mention here is enterprise risk management. You'll also see abbreviated down to ERM. All right. So that is something that is not compliant. So we do not have an enterprise risk management process at this time. Risk management 04. So strategic direction that describes appropriate risk response options is established and communicated. We do not have our risk response documented at all. So that's going to be a not compliant. Risk management 05, lines of communication across the organization are established for cybersecurity risks, including risks from suppliers and other third parties. So lines of communication across the organization are established. We do have a CISO, but we do not have So I'm actually probably going to mark this as compliant, because we do have a process already to communicate cybersecurity risks and third-party risk and so forth with the board itself. So that's not something we have included with suppliers or third parties technically at this time, because we don't have an established BPA, I believe is what it is, business partner agreement, with any of the services or third parties that we work with. So that would be kind of tailored out there, but the board itself is aware of how we communicate that. That's still something that would have to be documented though. All right, so risk management 06, a standardized method for calculating, documenting, categorizing and prioritizing cybersecurity risks is established and communicated. All right. So standardized method for the cybersecurity risk is established and communicated. Now, this is another thing where we need to document this into our policies and so forth. However, we have already agreed that we are going with NIST CSF. We are going through and using the 5x5, which is also straight with the 837, I believe, or the 830. Yeah, I think it's actually in the 830 for conducting risk assessment for the 5x5 matrix. So I'm going to mark this as partially compliant because, again, we need to have that documented. And I think a lot of these are going to be partially compliant or non-compliant. All right. And then 07. So strategic opportunities, positive risks are categorized and are included in organizational cybersecurity risk discussions. So positive risks, strategic opportunities. And so this is where hopefully PBO is still listening in or otherwise, because I may have to pull this open up on NIST because this one is a little bit more confusing for me. But so strategic opportunities, I believe what they're talking about is where there's a level of risk, but it says positive risk. I don't know if that's actually how it's documented in the CSF. Strategic opportunities, positive risks are categorized and are included in organizational cybersecurity risk discussions. So I think it's talking about opportunities. So like when you have a business opportunity and so forth, there is a positive outcome, but there's still a level of risk that's associated with such. And so it may be worth the risk in order to pursue. Is that what it's talking about? That's what I'm kind of thinking when it's mentioning positive risks with strategic opportunities. Yeah, and B-Dubs mentions 37 for the RMF. Yeah, so the 837 is the RMF technically, and then the 53 is the list of controls for the RMF. And then B-Dubs is mentioning opportunities, financial gain for the business. Yeah, so I think it is kind of what I'm thinking there. Yeah, and so CyberCycle mentions 30 is procedural to the framework within 37. Yeah, so I know for a fact that 830 is conducting risk assessments, and then the 37 is the RMF itself, risk management framework. That closely goes over to the 853, which is the list of actual controls for the risk management framework. And then the 839 is another really important one too, which is for actually running a risk management program. So those are like three of the primary documents. And I believe the 5x5 matrix is listed in the 30. And then CyberCycle mentions that falls into the risk response plan too. I think that might have been on the previous one. But yeah, that previous one that I marked out here, yeah, cybersecurity risk is established and communicated, yeah. Yeah, and so this one I'm going to go ahead and mark probably as partially compliant because we do discuss, especially for business decisions and so forth, going through and lining out some of those risks as well. That's one of the benefits of having a board that's GRC and so forth. So, yeah. And I don't think Evan is in chat, so Brocka Bare Bones, but that is our CISO. And I just wanted to do a little shout out there because recently he was awarded some type of not a recommendation, but he was recognized for his abnormally good work with his GRC course that he completed in his college program. So he got like a special award or honors for that GRC program. So GRC Mafia. B-Dubs is always multitasking. Listen while I multitask. Cybercycle mentions all these numbers are starting to sound like a football play being called out. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, RR01. And then also 30, 37, 39. 812 is also a really good one. 850 is a really good one. I remember when like I was having a really hard time trying to memorize some of that stuff, but there's probably about 10 or 12 different ones that I would say are critical or worth reading at least. And then maybe 5 that are like a necessity. So yeah, but the 812, the 850, the 30, the 37, the 39 are definitely really good ones. I believe 161 is for the third party. So time management. Yeah. Ooh, that could be a neat learning method. All right, so progressing through this a little bit more. So RR01, so organizational leadership is responsible and accountable for cybersecurity risks and fosters a culture that is risk aware, ethical, and continually improving. All right. Responsible and accountable for cybersecurity risks and fosters a culture that is risk aware, ethical, and continually improving. Bam. I'm going to go ahead and mark that as partially compliant. The main reason why, well, we could actually probably mark this as compliant at this time, but no, I'm probably going to still go ahead and mark this as partially compliant because again, we don't have those policies actually in writing yet. We don't have a document that outlines our responsibility and accountability that's signed off by the board at this time. So although we are fostering and keeping cybersecurity risks in mind and so forth, but we don't have that well documented at this time either. So RR02, roles, responsibilities, and authorities related to cybersecurity risk management are established, communicated, understood, and enforced. So this is another one where I'm going to go ahead and mark this as a partially compliant because although we do have like a CISO, a CTO, and so forth, and then we are following some different authorities or otherwise as well, this is another thing that is not well documented. So although we do have communication with that, we do have some understanding of such and so forth, but we need to do a better job at documenting this out as well. B-Dub's mentioning Startup Life. B-Dub's over here getting 3 hours of sleep. Okay, now RR03, adequate resources are oh, Jesus. I can't even pronounce that word right now. I haven't finished my second pot of coffee today, so I'm blaming it on that. With cybersecurity risk strategy, rules, responsibilities, and policies. So this is going to be one of the biggest struggle points because every single business struggles with the budgeting, of course. And so it's saying resources. Now that could be financial. That could also be just actual hands-on manpower, which also has a financial cost in business. Thankfully for Study GRC, we run on 100% volunteer. And so that's a benefit. However, resources come in a variety of different ways. So one of the different issues with this particular thing is because we do not currently have the policies built for this. We don't have a risk, a RACI matrix, which is, that should actually be, I'm making a note right now because we really should actually go through and build a RACI matrix on live stream as well. So a RACI matrix really lines out like what is whose responsibility and so forth in almost like a risk matrix type of design. So I just made a note of that real quick because that would be a really good one to do. I'm going to go ahead and actually mark this as not compliant because we don't really have that listed out for our risk strategy, roles, responsibilities, and policies at this time. So that's something we are going to have to definitely work on. RR04, cybersecurity is included in human resource practices. Okay, well, that's another one where we're not going to be compliant because we don't have a cybersecurity awareness program or otherwise at this time. And there's other things that are included with that too. So let me double check chat. Bam. And yeah, so risk matrix is going to be another, or RACI matrix is going to be a good one as well. And then there were several other ones that were mentioned before as well, which I took a screenshot of and made a note of for some of the different policies and documents too. So we are only at 17 out of 106. So it looks like this is going to be, we may be going through this until the CISSP study group tonight at 6. So PO01, so policy for managing cybersecurity risk is established based on organizational context, cybersecurity strategy, and priorities, and it is communicated and enforced. Not compliant. We do not have our policies. So O2, so policy for managing cybersecurity risks is reviewed, updated, communicated, and enforced to reflect changes in requirements, threats, technology, and organizational mission. Bam, we're going to be not compliant for that too. And so far, there hasn't been a single control at this time that would be not assessed. So if we do come across one that we are going to just completely throw out the window, we're not even worrying about it, we're going to mark as not assessed if it does not apply. An example of that would be if annual penetration testing, for an example, would be something that just wouldn't apply to us. That's not going to be something that we're going to even attempt. Unless there's a red teaming company out there, a penetration company who would like to volunteer to do so. The downside is that we are, 100% work from home, bring your own device. So that's going to complicate things a little bit. Let's see here. Oh, and also note to self. So bring your own device equals very bad. Don't do. Yeah. I'm just going to throw that in chat real quick. Bring your own device. Highly not recommended. Not ideal from a security standpoint. I would say frowned upon, at least in my opinion. OV01, cybersecurity risk management strategy outcomes are reviewed to inform and adjust strategic strategy and direction. So this is another one where we are so immature in our program at this time that that's not even something that we've worked with at this point. So that's going to be a not compliant. The cybersecurity risk management strategy is reviewed and adjusted to ensure coverage of organizational requirements and risks. So at this point, we're just now getting our risk management strategy put together. So we don't have anything to review. And we haven't really gone through that for our requirements and risks at this point. So that's going to be another not compliant. OV03, organizational cybersecurity risk management performance is evaluated and reviewed for adjustments needed. So this is another one where as of at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and mark this one as not compliant as well. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be another one where it gets changed later on. After we get policies built on that, then we'll have something actually dictated in our policies that, every, 6 months we go through and we evaluate and review for adjustments. So, we'll do an assessment every 6 months, and then we'll go through and make those reviews and evaluations. Yeah, and CyberCircle mentions it should be relabeled as BYOR, bring your own risk. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure there's people out there who are wanting to fight me on bring your own device and so forth. Oh, we we just tap into, you know, a virtual a VM, or you know, we have firewalls, you know, they connect to the company VPN and so forth. I don't care. Like, no matter which way you implement, nah. Not only do I personally feel like these large enterprises should not only provide the equipment, just morally speaking, but then also because I do feel like it's a level of taking advantage to an extent when you do bring your own device, but then also you have that entire security aspect as well. And then like, what can you actually do? Like, sure, you can have the employee like agree to all these contracts and agreements and so forth that, oh, hey, we're going to put spyware on your own device. But still, from an ethical standpoint, like, yeah. And then you also have the whole issue with bring your own device, where then the employee is utilizing that in their own personal time and for business purposes. And so then that's what increases that level of risk and so forth. And I just feel like in most business, it is an unnecessary level of use of somebody's device, but then also unnecessary risk in a lot of these situations as well. But also, when you look at the cost, I mean, the company saves a hell of a lot of money by doing bring your own device, which is why they do it. So SCO1, a cybersecurity supply chain risk management program, strategy, objectives, policies, and processes are established and agreed to by organizational stakeholders. We have none of those at this point in time. So we are just now getting a risk management program put together. We don't have a documented strategy or objectives, policies, or processes established. So this is going to be a not compliant. Bam. Also, welcome to the party, pal Albright, GRC Mafia. SCO2, cybersecurity roles and responsibilities for suppliers, customers, and partners are established, communicated, and coordinated internally and externally. All right, so this is another one where it's going to be not compliant. So we do not currently have cybersecurity roles and responsibilities for our third parties, customers, or partners at all. And to be honest with you, this actually may be... So this says coordinated internally and externally, but it's in regards to third party. So yeah, this is going to be another one that's going to be not compliant for now, but that's probably going to change. So then supply chain 03. So cybersecurity supply chain risk management is integrated into cybersecurity and enterprise risk management, risk assessment, and improvement processes. So this is another one. Now, this one we could probably mark as partially compliant. We do not have this documented at this time. However, we do have our third parties in here. And so like supply chain, we aren't really buying things or anything else, which is what most people think of for supply chain, at least. But we do have the third-party platforms and so forth as well. And so since we are already implementing that into CISO Assistant and so forth, I believe we could still mark this as partially compliant, but not compliant all the way. We still need to get policies and everything else built on that. Supply chain 04, under governance function. Suppliers are known and prioritized by criticality. So that is actually something that I just actually got done the other day. So yeah, over we went ahead and loaded in the risk, the third parties and everything else the other day, and last week, and then I think it was over the weekend, I went through and actually went ahead and prioritized most of them. And so I'm going to go ahead and mark that as partially compliant as well. We could actually probably get away with marking that as compliant already, because we have that loaded into CISO Assistant. And CyberCycle mentions, I agree, provision devices and use MDM. It protects the employee and company. And then 8-Bit mentions, that is where proper segmentation and zero trust come in. Yeah, you got to get on with a threat locker. There you go. which if you're watching Threat Locker, we are looking for sponsorship. So just a heads up, all about community, 100% back to the community. I have heard really good things about Threat Locker, in particular with that zero trust mindset and segmentation portion. And then also, like CyberCycle mentions, MDM. So mobile device management. I think that's most well known for on mobile devices, but they do have that for, Windows or Apple devices as well and so forth. But I've actually heard, there's businesses out there that will install MDM on bring your own device, and they just have a employee sign an agreement, which I think is just a little bit crazy. Let's see here. Oh boy, we're already 7 minutes over, and we're 26 out of 106 controls. Let's reassess here. So let's see here. What are we going to do? Let me go ahead and pull this up over here. I may just go ahead and keep running through it all. Get this all in one video, I guess. What do you guys think? You guys going to stick around for the next 4 hours while we go through this? And then it actually lines up perfectly, because tonight at 6 p.m. Central Time is the CISSP study group with B-dubs. And then at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central Time is the whole thing with PBO for that NIST publication. Let me check this real quick. Bam. All right. GRC Mafia. I hope you bought monsters. I do have a bunch of coffee. But honestly, to be completely honest with you, I may back out of this just to see, because it does say go back to the audit, because I do not know if it saves your flashcard status. I think it does, but I haven't tested that out yet. But we'll find out here in a moment. Let's see here. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. GRC Mafia. Oh, Sater got a membership there. Bam. Oh, Memorletti. Bam, Memorletti's in chat as well. Welcome to the party, pal. We got Justin Gold as well. Bam. Awesome. I figured I'd go ahead and drop that for everybody real quick. Oh, Cyber Research, you just missed everything. Doesn't look like Rania ended up getting one, though. Yeah. Now we figured out a way to figure out who all the lurkers are. I'm going to go ahead and drop Luke's LinkedIn real quick there. We have a command for that. All right, so let's go ahead and push through this. So as a little update, we're using CISO Assistant in order to go through. We added in our third parties. We added our risk register that we built out last month into CISO Assistant as well. If you're unfamiliar, CISO Assistant is a really awesome tool that's free and open source. You could run it in Docker. This last Friday, CISO Assistant also did a live stream on our channel that walks you through the actual setup process to set it up on Docker and in the cloud. So you can go ahead and check out their website there. Oh, I put in the command wrong there. Bam. All right. Hype. GRC Mafia. All right. And so now we went ahead and we're just starting our initial audit with the CSF 2.0. So that way we'll be able to look back later on and be like, okay, All of next month, we're going through and doing our policies. So we're going to do our policies, and then we're going to go through and do another audit. And from that audit, that assessment that we do after we do our policies and so forth, then we're going to actually go through and actually list out our POAMs and start fixing everything, start getting everything implemented. And then after we get to another stage of that, 6 months down the line, then we'll go through and do another assessment as well. And then start doing assessments every 6 months and start building out our maturity on it. That's kind of what we have on the roadmap at this time. Rania, you need to like double check your settings or something. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. You got to fix that. Come on, get on board here. Let's see here. Yeah, unfortunately, you can't like purchase a membership just for one individual. But here in just a moment, I'm going to go through and push through the rest of this assessment. So I think we're just going to go ahead and push. I'm at 26 out of 106 so far. So we should be good to go. And if anybody has any questions or otherwise, definitely drop that in chat. And one of the other big things that I want to do is like, if anybody has difficulty setting up CISO Assistant, you can do all of this kind of stuff in a spreadsheet as well. There's just so many different useful tools. And I love the fact that CISO Assistant goes through and provides this. All right. Bam. Well, and it also shows, I don't think all of those gifted memberships are even thrown out yet. I think there's still more to grab too. That's one of the things I was just checking there. All right, bam. All right, let's go ahead and get this knocked out. Yeah, and it didn't even give it to Rania yet. Man. And I see that Luke ended up becoming a member there. GRC Mafia. I'm going to try to keep up with all of that as much as possible. So at the very top, so on YouTube, it's a little bit weird. I'm not as familiar with YouTube mobile, but you should see a section at the top on that you can actually select. So I can actually go ahead and swap over to this. So if you look at my screen here, if you click on the memberships up at the top right of the live chat, then you can go ahead and select allow gifts. And then that's how you can go ahead and collect those. And then it goes through and just auto selects it. That's one of the issues when you do like the gifted memberships and so forth, is that it's just random. YouTube just automatically selects it. But let's go ahead and pop back over here. Bam. Yeah, it's a little bit different on the mobile end. Also 8-bit, I wanted to talk with you. So maybe Cyber Research or somebody else in the community knows more about Docker. I would actually really like to set up a installation, like an actual server that can auto deploy CISO Assistant Docker containers. And so I know it's possible, which is one of the benefits with containers. It's just, I don't have the technical skills on that. I have never done a setup like that before, but I think that would be really cool if we can provide that. 8-bit doesn't have one either. Wow, go figure. Well, I guess you'll have to join us Thursday for our meeting with Chad Butler talking about product security and so forth, and maybe you can get one then. So let's go ahead and push through here. So supply chain 05 requirements to address cybersecurity risks in supply chains are established, prioritized, and integrated into contracts and other types of agreements with suppliers and other relevant third parties. So are we telling, do we have anything already established where we're telling our third parties that, like, hey, these are cybersecurity risks and, this is our requirements and so forth for cybersecurity? Are we prioritizing that? Do we have a program already established when we onboard? Are we putting that into contracts and so forth? This one is actually really close to being not applicable. However, I'm just going to go ahead and mark this as not compliant at this time, strictly because it's not relevant at this current point in time. We don't have any third-party suppliers or otherwise that we would be doing that with at this time. However, when we go through and do assessments and so forth, I actually do plan on sending out emails or checking the websites and so forth. A lot of the different websites, like Atlassian, for an example, actually has a large majority of their security mitigations, I should say, or controls on their website. Supply chain 06, planning and due diligence are performed to reduce risks before entering into formal supplier or other third-party relationships. I love the fact of how they word this. So suppliers or other third-party relationships. So planning and due diligence. So this is another one where I'm going to go ahead and mark this probably as partially compliant, because although we do go through some type of review process and so forth, where ideally multiple people are involved, we need to get that documented in policy and actually have an actual mandatory process for that. So supply chain 07, the risks posed by a supplier, their products and services, and other third parties are understood, recorded, prioritized, assessed, responded to, and monitored over the course of the relationship. Ooh, that's another one. I'm going to mark that as completely non-compliant at this point. So this is something that we're working towards, so that way we can start keeping up with that with our third parties and so forth, but we do not technically have that at this time. We are going to be starting those assessments though. Cyber Research says that he's a noob with Docker. Well, come on, man, get on board. I do have some books on Docker and so forth, but I'm going to have to do some more research with that. The first link is grabbing the join at the end and giving a 404. What are you talking about there, Cyber Research? Is there a problem with Nightbot? So Nightbot is just our automated bot that relays stuff to chat and has some commands. I'm actually going to go ahead and drop the commands list. So you can actually open up the website for the list of commands that you can run in chat. The commands also work inside of our Discord server as well. Yeah, and 8-Bit mentions the best way to learn Docker is to break it. That is 100% correct. If you break something enough, then you figure out how it works, right? Or at least how it doesn't work. And then also Mike mentions, let's read this out. So positive risks are risky business opportunities that, if appropriately pursued, yield high positive outcomes, e.g. new technologies like AI that come with risks and high benefits for businesses. Yeah, that's a really good definition right there that we were talking about earlier for positive risk. All right, so relevant suppliers and other third parties are included in incident planning, response, and recovery activities. So this is something where we need to take this into account. So we need to have this to where we are taking that into account for incident response, incident planning, response, and recovery activities. That's something we need to have implemented. We do not have that at this time. So not compliant. Supply chain 09, supply chain security practices are integrated into cybersecurity and enterprise risk management programs, and their performance is monitored throughout the technology, product, and service lifecycle. All right, let's see. So we are working on our cybersecurity and ERM programs as we speak. Their performance is monitored throughout the technology, product, and service lifecycle. We do not have that. So we did start like our supply chain security practices, but I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant for now because there's so much more that we need to do. Like I said, I'm working on our schedule for next month, which is going to be very intensive. We're probably going to be doing twice as many streams because developing the policies, we have about 35 policies that we are going to try to complete next month. So yeah, like I said, so the weekend of the 22nd is when I'm going to get the schedule lined out for next month and get that written in stone. But I'm working on that scheduling now because I want to do as much as possible on live stream. So supply chain 10, cybersecurity supply chain risk management plans includes provisions for activities that occur after the conclusion of the partnership or service agreement. All right, that's another thing that we just don't have. AM 01, so inventories, so asset management 01, inventories of hardware managed by the organization are maintained. So that's another one we do not have. That's actually another thing. I think I have that lined up as well. We need to actually list out our assets. So what hardware the organization owns and so forth as well. So we do not have this right now. I'm going to mark that as not compliant. Inventories of software, services, and systems managed by the organization are maintained. So inventories of software, services, and systems managed by the organization. So again, we don't have a list at this point, so not compliant. Let me double check chat again here. All right, bam. All right, so representations of the organization's authorized network communications and internal and external network data flows are maintained. We have none of that. So internal, external network data flows are maintained. We have none of the data flows or otherwise. We don't even have anything for the network communications. This may actually be something that becomes not compliant, or I'm sorry, not applicable, because I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant for now, but this may be one of the different controls that we just don't even worry about because, again, we have a bring your own device, volunteers, and so forth. We don't have our own infrastructure. So like that, the network data flows is going to be, not applicable, more than likely. So AM04, inventories of services provided by suppliers are maintained. Inventories of services provided. So this is actually something that I was already working on. So at the beginning of this video, I did showcase how inside of CISO Assistant, you go ahead and mark out your third parties. And then you can also go through and list out what services are provided by those suppliers and attach those to those suppliers. And so I'm going to go ahead and mark this as partially compliant because we do have some of those in there and we are working on that process there. We have that capability, but that needs to be completed in full. We also need to get that documented and get that on a review cycle as well. Asset management 05. So assets are prioritized based on classification, criticality, resources, and impact on the mission. So again, we don't have an asset list or anything at this time for inventory, so I'm going to mark that as not compliant. When we do go through and build that out, we are going to have to list that out with classification, how important it is, and resources as well, along with the impact. AM 07, so asset management 07, Inventories of data and corresponding metadata for designated data types are maintained. So that's another one where that's just not compliant at this time. Which part did I overlook there? Oh, asked me about Docker. I replied, you can comment on that if you'd like a little bit. Oh, yeah, I will catch up with that later. So I got to run your paragraphs through some AI summarization first, 8-bit. I am partially joking there, though. All right, so AM08, systems, hardware, software services, and data are managed through their life cycles. So this is another big one for the policy section, and then also setting this up for procedures. So how are they managed throughout the life cycles? So not compliant, which we are expecting for this initial assessment to be largely non-compliant. Like I think there's only been a couple that we marked as compliant or partial at this point. So vulnerabilities and assets are identified, validated, and recorded. All right. In assets. So that's one of the key words here. So vulnerabilities in assets are identified, validated, and recorded. So we did go through and start a risk register basically, and then we went through and loaded that into CISO Assistant. We do have some of this implemented at this point in time, and if we do come across more, then we're going to go ahead and implement that too. I'm going to go ahead and mark this as partially, although this is also where we're going to have to go through and get this documented and into a review cycle as well. So RA02, so cyber threat intelligence is received from information sharing forms and sources. This one may be not assessed or not applicable just because of the expense involved. So the time it takes and so forth is just not going to be something that we'd be capable of. So cyber threat intelligence is, I'm sure that there's, you do have OSINT and so forth that's out there, although, Flare, for an example, is really well known for that cyber threat intelligence, and I think they do a really good job, but that's not something that a small nonprofit like Study GRC is going to be capable of, A, handling, but also two, affording. So much less hiring somebody on or otherwise to handle the cyber threat intelligence aspect of it. So I'm probably just going to mark this one right off the bat as not applicable, just because we're going to be tailoring this out. Or probably I'll just go ahead and mark it as not assessed. So RA03, internal and external threats to the organization are identified and recorded. So this is another one where they do have this type of thing built into CISO Assistant, but we do not have this at this time. We haven't implemented that. That's also another thing that would go into like our information security. So RA04, potential impacts and likelihoods of threats exploiting vulnerabilities are identified and recorded. So that's another one where it's just going to be not compliant at this point in time. Threats, vulnerabilities, likelihoods, and impacts are used to understand inherent risk and inform risk response prioritization. All right, so threats, vulnerabilities, likelihoods, and impacts are used to understand inherent risk and to inform risk response prioritization. So this one could be considered partially compliant because we already did start on some of this for threats, vulnerabilities, and likelihoods and impacts. Inherent risk is going to be after a control is already implemented. Or I'm sorry, inherent is off the bat, residual is the other one. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this as partial. And then risk responses are chosen, prioritized, planned, tracked, and communicated. So that's another one where we're not compliant with at this point in time. We do not have our risk response plans or policies implemented. We don't have any plans for that. and so forth. So we need to get work on that as well. We do have like incident response and recovery policies that we're going to be working on next month. RA07 changes and exemptions are managed, assessed for risk impact, recorded and tracked. So this I am actually going to go ahead and mark as compliant because moving forward, so we do need to get this documented into policy. However, we do have CISO Assistant for this now. So any exemptions or anything like that, we're going to go ahead and throw into CISO Assistant. Processes for receiving, analyzing, and responding to vulnerability disclosures are established. So that's another thing where we don't have that established at this point in time. So that's going to be not compliant as well. Oh yeah, no worries whatsoever, 8-bit. All right, and then let's see here. So the authenticity and integrity of hardware and software are assessed prior to acquisition and use. Ooh, that's a good one. The authenticity and integrity of hardware and software are assessed prior to acquisition and use. Is that something that we would implement? I mean, I think that would be an important factor to take into account. I'm kind of thinking how we would implement something like that. So, I mean, I guess this would be partially implemented. So I guess this would be implemented into like our onboarding or procurement policy itself. I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant at this time, so we could look back over that at a later time. RA10. So critical suppliers are assessed prior to acquisition. That's going to be another thing with that portion. I'm going to mark that as not compliant at this time. So are assessed prior. So actually, I'll go ahead and mark that as partially. We need to get that documented. However, we're obviously not like just onboarding anybody. So improvements are identified from evaluations. I'm going to mark that. So improvements are identified from evaluations. I think I'm going to mark that as partially as well because we are working on improvements and so forth as we go through everything. IMO 1. We need to get, again, document. IMO 2. So improvements are identified from security tests and exercises, including those done in coordination with suppliers and relevant third parties. So that's another one where that's going to be not compliant. 03, improvements are identified from execution of operational processes, procedures, and activities. So this one I could probably mark as partial as well. But again, we need to get like stuff written down on paper here. And then also, if you guys have any questions, even if it's not related to what we're talking about here, otherwise, you definitely feel comfortable to drop that in chat as well. Whether you drop it in the live chat on Discord itself, or you throw it in the comments below. So worst case scenario, if I can't answer something, I'm sure I know somebody who can. As long as it's not Docker, then I may be lost for words. We'll have to search through the community for Docker questions. CISO Assistant does have a wonderful Discord server though for support. So IMO 4, so incident response plans and other cybersecurity plans that affect operations are established, communicated, maintained, and improved. Let's see. So that's another one where we do not have that established whatsoever. AA01, so identities and credentials for authorized users, services, and hardware are managed by the organization. So again, documentation and so forth is going to be required. We don't manage the hardware itself, but we do manage the rest of it. So we do manage the authorized users for access management and so forth, access control. We do manage, so this is, I think this one may forever be partially compliant technically, because we have that bring your own device for hardware wise. And then also some of the different services like Discord, for an example, we don't manage the accounts themselves, but we do manage the access control. So AAO2, so identities are proofed and bound to credentials based on the context of interactions. I'm going to have to look that one up too. I mean, this is a perfect example, just like the one earlier where, you know, I'm learning right alongside everybody else here too. So identities are proofed and bound to credentials based on context of interactions. I'm not even sure about this control whatsoever. Where's PBO when you need them? We need the PBO bat signal. Yeah, so I'm actually marking this one down. I'm actually going to copy this over because I'm lost for words on that one. So NIST does provide a bunch of great documentation out there. It's just like the 53. The 53, I believe it's 853A, which actually has an entire list. If you ever have any questions whatsoever regarding any of the controls in the 53, you go to 853A, and it has a complete breakdown of every single one along with examples. And it really great job that NIST did on that. And so they do have a similar thing for the 2.0. So you can look these up and so forth. So I'm just going to mark this one as not assessed for now to skip over AAO2 and come back to that. AAO3, users, services, and hardware are authenticated. So this would be another one where, yes, it is technically partially compliant. So we can go ahead and push through that one. AAO4, identity. And so another thing that I probably should have premised off the bat is a lot of this stuff, you're going to have to be interviewing people. So like in a typical organization, you're going to actually have to break this up and actually talk to those actual owners of that. And so for an example, access controls or otherwise, I may have to talk to, 3 different people and interview 3 different people and ask them questions in order to get the answers to a lot of these different controls and so forth. It makes it a lot easier when you're doing like an internal, because I know the organization and what we have at the current point, we're very small and so forth. And so that makes it easier. And I don't have to go off and ask and like book a meeting with the CISO or with the CTO or otherwise to get this information. Now this may be refined later on as we go through, but I just wanted to note that too, is in a typical engagement, you're almost certainly going to have to be booking multiple interviews with multiple individuals and so forth, depending on the size of the organization, like who's involved. This flashcard style is just a really cool feature of CISO Assistant that allows you to push through a large majority of it. And if you're not sure, you just mark it as not assessed, and then you come back to it at a later time. So then you can quickly go through and fill out what you can. So AAO4, identity assertions are protected, conveyed, and verified. That's another one where I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant at this point in time. We need to get that stuff checked out first and get that documented as well on how all of that's handled. So AAO5, access permissions, entitlements, and authorizations are defined in a policy, managed, enforced, and reviewed, and incorporate the principles of least privilege and separation of duties. Congratulations, NIST. Round of applause. GRC Mafia. What a very broad, extensive sentence of a control they put in here. So yeah, least privilege and separation of duties for access, basically. And that needs to be in policy. It needs to be managed, enforced, and reviewed. That is a really important one there. So we don't have the policy on it yet, although we have already run off of a mindset of least privilege and that security mindset within the organization itself, and even a separation of duties as well. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as partially compliant, although we do not have all of that, such as policy, enforcement, and a review process. We do not have at this point. Yeah, Albright, how are you doing? Welcome to the party, pal. GRC Mafia. Yeah, and like Laura also mentions, so AAO2 that I was confused about, Laura is mentioning that it sounds like it's talking about how you prove who users are. Yeah, I'm definitely going to confirm that. And so that was AA02 out of the CSF 2.0. And we have Memorletti popping in chat there too, saying hello. Welcome to the party, pal. GRC Mafia for a bit. I hope everything's going all right. AA06, physical access to assets is managed, monitored, and enforced with risk. So physical access. So this is going to be another one where it's most likely going to be not applicable, strictly because we are 100% volunteer and remote. So physical access to assets is managed, monitored, and enforced. That's going to be something hard to implement. So even if the organization owns physical assets, which technically we do, so but how would you go through and manage that, monitor, and enforce that from a physical access standpoint when we all work remotely and so forth? So that brings it in its own nuances and so forth. So I'm going to probably mark that as not applicable. AT01 personnel are provided with awareness and training so that they possess the knowledge and skills to perform general tasks with cybersecurity risks in mind. So this is another one where I'm going to go ahead and actually mark this very important control as not compliant. So thankfully we do have all cybersecurity, like our entire board is, works in industry, practitioners and so forth in the security industry and so forth. And so that is a really awesome part. However, we do not have defined policies or processes, procedures for that awareness training. And so that's definitely something we do need to get implemented as well. All right, let's see. So AT02, individuals in specialized roles are provided with awareness and training so that they possess the knowledge and skills to perform relevant tasks with cybersecurity risks in mind. Just a moment here. All right, let's see here. All right, so AT02, individuals in specialized roles are provided with awareness training so that they possess the knowledge, skills relevant with cybersecurity risks in mind. Yeah, I think that's the one that I was marking as not compliant. That was the previous, very similar to the previous one. DS01, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, CIA, triad is what it's calling out there, of data at rest are protected. So that is a pretty broad one as well. So in a very short sentence there, they are calling out the CIA triad for data at rest is protected. So how could you, so then in order to be compliant with a control like this, you have to actually implement control or controls in order to maintain the confidentiality, that the integrity itself and the availability of data at rest, and for its protection itself. And so, yeah, just implementing encryption, is that going to meet all of those requirements? Probably not. So there's also like load balancing or otherwise. So data at rest is the key word there, along with protected. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant. Now, even considering our size and so forth, I still think that this is an important control that we would still implement to some extent, at least to a partially compliant standard. I'm not marking this as not applicable because this is also really important. So we do have data backups. I keep offline backups and everything else as well, especially for like our live streams and everything else. And we do have many projects that we've already gone through and completed. We also have a lot of like really awesome stuff going on in the background that I hope to come to light in the next few months. That's going to be a huge benefit to the community. So that protection of that data at rest is important for that CIA triad. DSO2, so the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data in transit are protected. All right, so now it's talking about data in transit, not at rest. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant right now as well, strictly just because we don't have anything in paper. We haven't really assessed that at this point. So that's what we are going to go through and do. Right now, we're just doing a compliance check. All right, so now the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data in use are protected. So again, I'm just going to mark this as not compliant, strictly just because we haven't gone through and gathered evidence for such and so forth. DS11, so backups of data are created, protected, maintained, and tested. Technically, all of that is true except for the tested portion probably. So we haven't really had to do a recovery or anything like that at this point in time, although that is something you want to do in business where you test your backups. So your backups are really no good or useful if you need them and they don't work. So, you know, that's an important step too. I'm going to mark this as partially compliant. We need to get this documented in our backups policy. However, we do have multiple backups. They're protected and maintained as well. So we just don't have that tested or documented. PSO1, configuration management practices are established and applied. All right, configuration management practices. So we do go through and double check configurations, prevention for being proactive against misconfigurations and so forth. But this is another difficult one too, because again, we don't have anything established as far as like policies. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that one as not compliant as well. Software is maintained, replaced, and removed with risk. That's another one where I'm going to mark that as not compliant. That makes it more difficult with bring your own device. PSO3, hardware is maintained, replaced, and removed. These ones may not even apply. So log records are generated and made available for continuous monitoring. This is one where we may have something like this implemented eventually as far as log records go, but at this current point in time, that's not really something we're working with at all. I'm going to leave that as not assessed, so we could circle back around to that though. And then PSO5, installation and execution of unauthorized software is prevented. So that's another one where bring your own device. We don't have any virtual desktops or anything like that. So that one's probably not going to be applicable. PS06, secure software development practices are integrated and their performance is monitored throughout the software development lifecycle. So that's not going to apply to us either. So that's going to be not applicable. All right, so now we've made it to 71 out of 106. We are 9 minutes to our 2-hour mark. Let me go ahead and double check chat and everything else here, and we'll see where we sit. Oh, I got to swap accounts here. Yeah, I hope everybody's having a great week so far. GRC Mafia. All right, so I just went ahead and launched a poll to see whether or not you guys want to keep on actually pushing through this all the way to that 106, or if you guys want to just go ahead and break. I'm fine either way. We have a good group of people listening in and tuning in, GRC Mafia, and so I just want to give you guys the option too, because you know, this could definitely be pretty dull going through and listening to. So. This is the complete CSF 2.0 and just our initial compliance check. One of the things I do want to check here, so we are at 71 out of 106, and I'm going to click on go back to the audit to see if it saves our space as well. So you can see here how it's gone through and listed out. And this is another thing that I really like. So this is the benefit of having a GRC tool, is you get these pretty graphs and colors and so forth, and some of these automations, so then you don't have to do it. And so you could see the green, the red, the yellow, the black, and we also have 1 in progress, 30 to do, and so forth. And we're not all the way through it, but it does show that we did save this. And so one of the things I wanted to check is, okay, we were at 71 out of 106. So if we go back into flash mode, is that gonna, oh, it doesn't. So that's what I wanted to check, is that it does not save our space. So literally now, if we go ahead and continue, I'm going to have to skip all the way through to 71. And so that's going to be my third recommendation. So we have selecting multiple related controls for our vulnerabilities, but then also going through and dark mode, and then also picking up, saving the space on what control we're at in the assessment itself for the flash mode. So we were at 71 out of 106, and it does not auto save that, but you can see here how it really kind of helps here. And then we can actually break this down. We can go into the different subcategories and functions, and then really start breaking this down. So like for an example, I just opened up the organizational mission is understood and informed cybersecurity risk management. We have that as partial. We can go ahead and enable scoring here. And this is based off of the profile, the different NIST tiers. So for the score. And then we can also go ahead and like upload evidence, exemptions, and so forth from this panel as well. So I'm going to go ahead and skip back to our page here, and then let me double check chat. Cybercycle, hands-on CSF 2.0 still going on. Yeah. I'm legit considering just going through and pushing through all 106. I just don't want to put everybody to sleep here. Mike, Team Live, Study GRC, GRC Mafia. Yeah, and also you guys are welcome to drop other questions and so forth as well. I am going to communicate probably with the CISO assistant team regarding some deployments as well. So I want to give everybody an opportunity to actually get into CISO Assistant and dig into it a little bit. I think it's a really great tool, especially for those small and medium-sized businesses. You could run an entire enterprise out of here as well. So that's one of the awesome things is not only do they have the community edition, especially if you're on a budget, but even if you are an enterprise, I could 100% see you running your program through here as well. So it is very, very well done. Oh, yeah, Mike. Yeah, GRC Mafia. So these streams are typically an hour in length. We are coming up to the 2-hour mark, but we may go ahead and keep pushing through. I don't mind. I love doing the live streams and so forth, and I want to go through and showcase as much as possible as we build out this program. And that's like one of the big things that I was mentioning a few times throughout this video is next month we are going to be hitting the ground really hard. With us going through and having like 35 different policies outlined for development all of next month. Like I'm working on the schedule as we speak, and we'll get those videos and schedule published out next on the weekend of the 22nd. But it's not going to be easy to do 35 policies in a single month. That is quite a bit of work there. And so I want to live stream as much of everything as possible. And what I don't live stream, I'm going to be showcasing on live stream to say, hey, just like I did at the beginning of this video, I was going through and showing you guys how like, oh, in the third parties, by the way, I went through and added a few things in here. So we added solutions in here, which I did outside of the live streams. And so if I do anything outside of the live streams, I will be mentioning that on the following hands-on live stream itself. But like I'm looking at with the policy development, like we may be doing 2-hour streams 5 days a week for the policy development alone, to be honest with you, because that's pretty intensive. So 2 hours a day, 5 days a week would be 10 hours alone on policy development, and on top of our other streams as well. So I'm looking at what we can do with that and so forth, but I'm using that as an example on the fact that I have no issue with it. I love live streaming. As long as you guys are getting value out of it, and also you guys can ask other questions. If I don't know something, I'm sure somebody either in chat or somebody else I know will be able to answer that. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So we were over here on compliance, audit. Let's go ahead and pop open the CSF one that we've been working on. And then I'm going to double check chat again over here. And it looks like we're going to go ahead and push through this. So we have 57% right now out of 7 votes saying to go ahead and push through GRC Mafia. So if you guys haven't voted yet, there is a poll that I initiated. I'll go ahead and give it a couple more minutes, and we'll go ahead and go get started here again. I'm gonna go refill my coffee real quick. Talk amongst yourselves. All right, bam, GRC Mafia. All right, let's go ahead and push. Let's go, GRC Mafia. All right, so we're gonna go back into flash mode. We were at number 71, and I'm gonna go ahead and skip past that. So I would like to see them implement it to where it saves your spot, but it doesn't appear to do so at this time. So that's another big thing on CISO Assistant is that, yeah, they have their community edition. It is a small team doing it. And one of the biggest things, it's just like with us, we want to provide value to the community and so forth. And a really big, important aspect of that is getting feedback and suggestions. What do you guys want to see? What could we do better? Did we fail on something or otherwise? All of that is extremely critical to our mission. It's the exact same thing with CISO Assistant. So providing that feedback like, hey, it would be nice if we could save our spot. You know, it's a minor thing, but that is like just one of those little things that could make a difference. All right, so IR, so Incident Response 01, networks and environments are protected from unauthorized logical access and usage. Whew. So the important thing to mention here is that it says networks and environments. So the environments is typically going to be like systems and so forth, and areas there. So are protected from unauthorized logical access. So logical meaning not physical. So technically this would also apply to like cloud installations and so forth as well. I'm going to go ahead and mark this as not compliant, because this is probably something that will be partially compliant in the future, but it's not going to follow underneath not applicable. Let's see here. So Mike asks a question. So quick question. So far, controls are requirements that do not apply to you at this current moment. Why not say not applicable, NA, instead of not compliant? So, so the main reason why is because basically what we're doing is we're trying to figure out where we're at right now in regards to what we're going to utilize out of the CSF. And so the ones that we're marking as not applicable is going to be the controls that we're not even worried about, that we're going to tailor out entirely. And so even though that some of these do not apply to us at this current point in time, we need to know, it'd be easier for me to showcase once we finish this, because then like on the screen I was at a moment ago that had the actual pie chart, you could see where it shows the red section of not compliant. So then that tells us like, hey, these are the controls that we want to implement. And then we can go through and develop our plans to mitigate those, to get controls in place to fix those. So that way we can move to that partially compliant or compliant stage of it. So at this point, you could use this compliance check with the CSF as our, tailoring of the framework itself. So in short, I hope I explained that well enough there, but yeah, non-compliant I'm utilizing as in we need to be compliant, but we're not at this time. Whereas not applicable is going to be like, it doesn't apply to us. And right after that question, I want to mention here too, that you did say, I mean, for the activities that you are not engaged in currently. So there were a couple different ones that I did mark as not applicable, because if it's not something that we're going to implement or otherwise, then I'm not marking that. So I am going to mark that as not applicable. So the organization's technology assets are protected from environmental threats. So like this is a good example here. So our technology assets protected by environmental threats. How are we going to even do that? So with bring your own device, and then also even though the organization does technically own assets, physical assets already, with a 100% remote workforce and so forth, volunteer, that's going to be very difficult to at least physically protect that from environmental threats like hurricanes and blizzards and floods and things like that. So this would be a good example of not applicable, strictly because we're going to tailor that out completely. IR03 mechanisms are implemented to achieve resilience requirements in normal and adverse situations. So this could be like processes and procedures that we develop to achieve. So, when things aren't ideal or otherwise. So like an example of this could be like, okay, we use cloud backups right now. Okay, well, what if we lose access to that cloud? So our files are stored in the cloud right now. What if that cloud provider is unavailable? The availability is gone out of the CIA triad. One of the benefits is that I also have downloaded, I have on disk copies and so forth. I have offline backups and so forth. And so that could be a quick recovery process. Although, like I mentioned earlier, we have not tested that. And that would be something that we need to get implemented. So this is going to be another one where we have not compliant, although this is something that we should have implemented. So this is something we are going to get to. IR04, adequate resources capability to ensure availability is maintained. This is another one where, so this could be actual like hardware capabilities. This could be personnel capabilities and so forth. You know, this is another really broad one as well. Resource capability for availability. So I think primarily this is going to come down to a personnel resource capability or capacity, but I'm going to go ahead and mark that one as not compliant as well, because this is another thing that we're going to have to circle back around to and work on at least becoming partially compliant with. CM01. So networks and network services are monitored to find potentially adverse effects. So we did mention bring your own device and so forth. And at this current point in time, we don't have a managed device management at all, or mobile device management or anything like that at this current point in time. We don't monitor any of that right now. We do have logs and monitoring for different business accounts and so forth. But it's not like we have like forced policies on device for, you know, proactive virus detection and things like that, or on network. And so this is probably one that we would also tailor out. So networks and network services are monitored. So that's going to be another one that's going to be not applicable. So CM02, the physical environment is monitored to find potentially adverse effects. So this is another one where it's just not going to be applicable because we're remote workforce, volunteer, bring your own device. And so that environmental and the physical environment is not going to be something that we're going to be able to monitor easily or otherwise, or something that we're not going to be able to manage. So I'm going to mark that as not applicable. CM03, personnel activity and technology usage are monitored to find potentially adverse effects. So that is something that we have implemented. So personnel activity. So our accounts, we have, I think on pretty much all of our services and platforms that we utilize, we have logs such as login information. Where did they log in from? What time? You know, did they use MFA or not? Did they fail MFA? And we do have, you know, some usage data as well. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as partially compliant at this point in time. Although this does say are monitored to find potentially adverse effects. And so that's something we're going to have to document and have procedures for. Although at this point in time, it's just kind of on a irregular basis. Let me double check chat here. Yeah, and I hope I answered your question there, Mike. Let me know if I wasn't clear enough or otherwise, but that's a really good question that you asked. CM06. Oh yeah, and let me go ahead and end this here. So we have 62%. I just went ahead and ended the poll. So 62% said, let's go. GRC Mafia. 37% said, nah, pick it up later. So I do recognize you guys on the 37%. That's one of the huge benefits of having this recorded, is at least you guys can come back and listen at a later time. It is during the workday and so forth. We definitely understand that and so forth. So if you got to drop, no worries whatsoever. I appreciate everybody tuning in and so forth. definitely looking for feedback, suggestions, and everything else. And even if you guys have questions not related to this, definitely drop it in chat as well, so we can also, leverage the community on that front. All right, so CM06, external service provider activities and services are monitored to find potentially adverse effects. So that's another one where we don't have that. So that's probably not even something we're going to be able to work with. So that's probably going to be not applicable as well. CM09, computing hardware and software runtime environments and their data are monitored to find potentially adverse effects. Computing hardware and software runtime. So that's another one where with your bring your own device and we don't have any management software or otherwise for that, that's not going to be something we're going to be able to do at this point in time. Potentially adverse effects are analyzed to better understand associated activities. Potentially adverse effects are analyzed to better understand potential associated activities. So this is one where I think we should probably mark this as maybe partially compliant, because when we do notice potential adverse effects, we do go through a informal incident response type of activity or otherwise to analyze it, to not only better understand the activities, but then also to, do we need to respond to this? How could we improve and so forth? So it's not something that's well documented or otherwise. It's quite informal. However, we are still on the outlook for that. Information is correlated from multiple sources. So AE03. That's kind of broad there. So that one I'm going to go ahead and mark as not assessed at this time. AE04, the estimated impact and scope of adverse effects are understood. So that one could vary as well. So estimated impact and scope of adverse effects. So this is something where I'm going to put as not compliant, because at this point we don't really have our program well developed. And so do we really have estimated impact and scope documented well? Do we really understand that at this point in time? I don't believe so. So that's something where we're hopeful to get to in the near future. So that way we could say, if this service goes down, then this is the impact and this is what it affects and so forth. But at this point in time, we're just too immature in our program to be able to actually have that and actually even say partially compliant. Cyber research mentions high CPU usage. Are you like running a crypto miner or something like that? I hear, you can make some real good money off of those crypto miners you download off of a Google search. All right, so AE06, information on adverse effects. Effects. Information on adverse events is provided to authorized staff and tools. That's going to be another partially implemented. So AE07, number 84 out of 106, cyber threat intelligence and other contextual information are integrated into the analysis. Now, that's another really good one. So if we're going through and we're analyzing an incident or a potential adverse effect or otherwise, then technically, we could implement some level of cyber threat intelligence to some extent. Technically, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're doing like an impact or otherwise for Discord, for an example, are there any existing CVEs out there? Is there anything out in the wild? What issues have occurred recently? That is a level of cyber threat intelligence. So I think that's something that we could have something of some level of cyber threat intelligence implemented to some extent. But it's definitely going to be more OSINT than anything else. So A08, incidences are declared when adverse effects meet the defined incident criteria. Bam. So, what it's kind of saying there is that we need to define incident criteria and then also, declare when, when does it come from an adverse effect to an incident. And so I'm going to mark that as not compliant at this point in time. We need to get a lot of this stuff documented out. All right, let's see. Okay, so MA01, the incident response plan is executed in coordination with relevant third parties once an incident is declared. Okay, so this is going to be something that's going to be implemented into our incident response policy. I'm going to go ahead and mark this as partially compliant, strictly because, of course, if there is an incident that occurs, we will coordinate with any affected third parties or otherwise to the extent that we can or otherwise. However, we need to get that documented in our incident response policy as well. MA02, so incident reports are triaged and validated. So we don't have a process for this at this point in time. I'm going to mark that as not compliant just because we have nothing. Incidences are categorized and prioritized. I'm going to mark that as not compliant as well. We need to get that declared. Incidences are escalated or elevated as needed. I'm going to go ahead and mark that as partially compliant. So that's another benefit of our team, is that we have a really amazing board and so forth. So especially if it's something that I can't handle or otherwise, or even another board member or another person involved on the study GRC team, I feel we all are in a really good mindset of like, let's get everybody on board who can handle what. And, get that escalated or get it figured out on an as needed. Let's see. MA05, the criteria for initiating incident recovery are applied. So that's another one where I'm going to mark that as not compliant because we don't have anything documented for that at this time. Yeah, and so I hope I was able to answer your question there, Mike. And if anybody else has any other questions or otherwise, definitely drop it in chat, whether it's related to this or not. And then I'm going to drop our Discord link as well, because outside of the streams or even during the streams, you guys can hop over to the Discord as well. And that's a really awesome place to post things. Let me double check that real quick. Bam. All right, so AN03, analysis is performed to establish what has taken place during an incident and the root cause of the incident. All right, analysis is performed. So this is another one where I'm just going to mark as not compliant because we don't have anything documented at this time, like a lot of these things. So actions performed during an investigation are recorded and the record's integrity and provenance are preserved. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant. We don't have anything for that yet, but we should. Incident AN07, incident data and metadata are collected and integrity and provenance are preserved. Not compliant. AN08, an incident's magnitude is estimated and validated. I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant. We need to get that implemented. CO02, so internal, external stakeholders are notified of incidences. That's going to be a Well, it says internal, external stakeholders are notified of incidents. So I'm going to mark that as partial because that's of course going to be part of the process. But again, we have a very informal thing at this time. COO3. So information is shared with designated internal, external stakeholders. So I'm going to mark that as another partial. It's going to be informal at this current point in time. We're going to get more stuff implemented for that. MIO1 incidences are contained. That one I'm going to mark just as non-compliant because we don't have anything designated. This may also, so incidences are contained is very broad as well. So containing something, whether it be from our Discord or YouTube or a streaming platform or otherwise, it's going to vary. And so, you know, depending on the service and so forth. And that's also where mitigations come in, and developing a program and incident response plans and playbooks are going to be extremely crucial to you know, get to that point. MIO2 incidences are eradicated. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as not compliant at this time as well. That's something we're going to have to review. RPO1. So the recovery portion of the incident response plan is executed once initiated from the incident response process. I remember looking over this. So you guys may not be familiar, but I did develop an entire slide deck. I could drop that into Discord, actually. It's really pretty. And I think it's a really cool thing. Let me actually do that real quick because before I forget, because that's actually a really cool resource. It's something that I had published on LinkedIn at one point. Where do I have that? Oh yeah, here it is. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this open real quick, just because it reminded me of this here. So we are coming down the last few controls, but so I'm popping this up on stream here. And so this is a PDF document. I'm going to drop this into the Discord community channel here in just a moment. This is just another one of the visualizations that I made. And I just found this to be really useful. And so again, this is all of the different controls. You can see here June of 24, and it goes through and lists everything out. You could see here that, you know, back then we were doing Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So that goes to show. And then you can get all of the same information from the primary NIST document that's linked here. But what this is it lists out the different functions for the CSF 2.0. And then also it goes through all of the documents, or I'm sorry, all of the different controls here. I did get some feedback that some of this may be hard to read for some individuals and so forth. I just like the Blackboard style. And, you know, this is 33 slides for all of the different controls. And so I remember very vividly going through this control here towards the end. And I'm going to skip down here. So like for an example, we are on RPO1. So RPO1 right here. So the recovery portion of the incident response plan is executed once initiated from the incident response process. And so I remember this one vividly because when I first went over this one, I was like, what the hell does that even mean? Yeah, no worries, Memorlady. Thanks for hopping in, GRC Mafia. Yeah, and so all it's literally dictating is the fact that our incident response needs to actually state when we go into recovery, is the gist of it. And so I'm going to mark that as not compliant at this point. RPO2. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm back on the right screen again. All right, and then RPO2, so recovery actions are selected, scoped, prioritized, and performed. Recovery actions selected, scoped, prioritized, and performed. We don't have compliance for that yet. RPO3, the integrity of backups and other restoration assets is verified before using them for restoration. So that's another one where we don't have a process for that yet. Critical mission functions in cybersecurity risk management are considered to establish post-incident operation norms. All right, so critical mission functions are considered to establish post-incident operation norms. So we don't have any of that either yet, but we should. RPO5, the integrity of restored assets is verified, systems and services are restored, and normal operating status is confirmed. We need to have actual policies and procedures built for that. RPO6, the end of incident recovery is declared based on criteria and incident related documentation is completed. Again, we don't have any of that documented at this time. That's something that we need to have implemented for the procedures and policies. CO03, so recovery activities and progress is in restoring operational capabilities are communicated to designated internal and external stakeholders. So that's one where I'm probably going to just mark that as partially compliant. We need to have, so that's going to be communicated, although, again, it's informal at this point in time. CO04, public updates on incident recovery are shared using approved methods and messaging. That's actually going to probably be a part of our communications policy. So I'm going to mark that as not compliant at this time. So OCO1, oh, we're done. So that's another thing, is that it just went back to 1 out of 106 there. So we went ahead and went through the whole thing there. So I'm going to go ahead and click back on, go back to the main screen for this audit here. Let me double check chat here. I see Albright drop in GRC Mafia. Bam. So we are at 2 hours and 28 minutes so far. So coming up to that 2.5 hour mark here in just a moment. So Cyber Research asks that, mentions that they had missed the beginning portion. In the beginning, I did cover a couple of the things that I did outside of the live stream because I want to document that as well as possible. I want to live stream as much of building out the program as I possibly can. But yes, in short, what we were just doing is our initial compliance check against the NIST CSF. So what we're going to be working towards is we're going to, the rest of this month, we are going on Mondays and Tuesdays, we will be doing assessments on our third parties, the different third party platforms that we utilize and services that we use. But this is going to be, this is just our global compliance check to see what we have and what we need in regards to the NIST CSF 2.0. And so we just went through on flash mode and completed a large majority of it. And so you could see here that we have 30 of the 106 that are partially compliant. We have 62 non-compliant, and then we have 8 that are not applicable. We have 4 not assessed and 2 compliant. So this gives us an idea of like what areas do we need to work on and so forth. And this is not a surprise whatsoever. This is literally like equivalent to the gap analysis on identifying, okay, well, this is what we're lacking at this point in time on a global organizational scale. So I'm going to stick around for a few moments here. I hope everybody's having a great Tuesday. Definitely catch us tomorrow as well. So later today at 6 p.m., B-Dubs will be going through and doing the CISSP study group. I'm going to go ahead and drop those links again. So that's going to, I think I did that right. So that's going to be at 6 p.m. tonight, Central Time. You can go ahead and check it out on the website here. So cissp.britwhite.io. So Tuesdays at 6 p.m. and then also Saturdays at 3 p.m. is when those study groups are. So session 3 starts tonight, and then that's going to move into Discord following that live stream. And then after that, at 8 p.m. Central Time, PBO will be going live regarding one of the IRS documents for their contractors for their privacy and security. So yeah, definitely catch that CISSP. That's built for everybody. So whether you're planning to test out for it, you're new to the industry, or you just want to learn more or network socialize and so forth, it's really built for everybody at all stages. So really awesome information to learn. Hashtag continuous learning, everyday learning. And one of the other things I also want to note too is that BDubs has been doing an amazing job at posting quiz questions in the Discord server as well. Yeah, and like BDubs mentions, is everybody is welcome to join. It really is beginner friendly as well. If you guys have any questions, anything goes over your head or otherwise, drop it in the live chat, throw it in the Discord server and so forth. There's plenty of people out there willing to help at all stages. All right, let's see here. And then also I dropped PBO's channel as well, because he'll be going live tonight as too. And I did drop that PDF document into our Discord server. So if you want to get a copy of this and take a look at it, you can also use this or the Trello board, are two really good resources that we've put together. So bam. And then I'm going to just move back over here to CISO Assistant again for a moment. So again, I just already walked through the pie chart here, but now like the next stages that we're going to be looking at is now we kind of have somewhat of an idea of an area that we have to look at. And so we'll probably have to go back over the not assessed section at least and dictate whether those are partially compliant, non-compliant, or not applicable, just so we have that dictated. But then this gives us a nice little overview. And yeah. And then there's also like action plans as well here. So we can go through and start knocking out action plans following. And then what we'll be starting up next week and the rest of the month for the hands-on. So the 17th, 18th, 24th, 25th, 31st, we'll be going through and doing the third parties. So we'll be coming over here to third parties. Like for an example, maybe we'll start with Restream to start with, and we'll go ahead and start a entity assessment in accordance to the CSF 2.0. Or otherwise. But yeah, if anybody has any questions or otherwise, definitely hop into our Discord server and so forth. And yeah, leverage the community. That's one of the biggest things I can go ahead and throw out there. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream here in just a moment. And yeah, thank you to everybody for hopping in, sticking around. This was a much longer stream than originally planned. But I hope you guys got value out of this portion. And I really look forward to our Thursday meeting, especially. So that CISSP is a really big deal. But then also on Thursday night, we have Chad Butler coming up for product security, which is going to be an absolute killer talk as well. So I'll catch you guys in Discord. See you guys tomorrow.